Yeah, I think it's a really critical point because I think there's a lot of people that take this really narrow view of what what happens during a merger or what happens when a company is acquired. But I mean, from a change management standpoint, there's a really broad impact that I feel like comes about that nobody really understands whenever you're going into it, whether you're the acquirer or you're
Yeah.
the company being acquired. It doesn't matter. I mean, you will change and merge
Yes.
as
Yeah.
like it or not, you will. And then also, like, is that a positive thing or a negative thing? And in
Yeah.
reality, does it really matter? I mean, at the end of the day, like, put the pieces together. Let's figure out, like, how do we execute? And then
Yeah.
when we're in that bigger state, imagine how much better the world will be.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I think it's from both sides. If it's two companies coming together, as long as you've got that vision on what we're actually solving for in the process of the change, that's your opportunity to make it something positive, to make it something that people really rally around as opposed to more of an us and them
Mhm.
experience. So and I almost hate using the word like change management anymore anyway. It was such a big thing for a while and change agility and I'm great at change and I can do all this, but it's just kind of part of our dynamic now with the way that the market shifts, how quickly technology is shifting, the way that we actually perform marketing. So to me, it's just like, okay, day to day nimbleness in the job. You just need to get the job done. What's it look like? How do we continuously adapt to make that happen?
Yeah. Yeah, also important parts. So how do you approach building and leading high performing teams, and what strategies have you found to be most effective?
Yeah. I might be a little more classic in this one. I feel like when I first went through some leadership exercises at Core and we were going through sort of team formation, I was going back to really traditional team performance model. And kind of thinking about that in terms of was it maybe 7 steps or so of what it takes to kind of really get a team engaged and ramped up. And um I think about it like that old adage of problem solving, right? If you spend the 80% of your time defining the problem to solve, you can really expedite getting to solution. And I think about that with org work and really getting a team together. I think if you slow down up front to establish your identity as a team, your values as a team, when you talk about that, what does that look like? What does it feel like? So they're not just empty words on paper. Um, Even contracting a bit on what'll happen if things aren't working the way that we expected them to just all of those conversations and then not walking past spending the time too on bonding and getting to know each other as humans. You build all of that all of that credit, all of that trust. And so by the time you get toward execution, I think you're on a much faster trajectory to just have a sort of healthy execution across the team.
Yeah, I think I've said this before as well. This whole concept of taking it slow to go fast
Yeah,
is
exactly.
not a
That's exactly
common
it.
not a common way of thinking of things, but it is the way that the world seems to work. Like, let's make sure we get all of the like I constantly telling my team like let's make sure we get the input side correct first, and
Yeah.
then we could push the accelerator all the way to the floor. Otherwise, we're going to
Yeah.
push the accelerator to the floor and then have to go back to the beginning again and try and get it right the
Yeah.
second time. And it's not as much fun the second time around.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I think that's interesting too about high performing teams is I also think people, even if you invest in the foundation, we tend to think about it very linear. And so I don't think we realize that there's different times in that cycle that you're probably going to have to go back to the beginning. Did you bring in a new team member? Did you introduce a system that's now disrupting the way that we work? Things like that, where now you probably need to revisit some of your foundational discussions to make sure that you're still able to have truly excellent execution further downstream. So, yeah, spending the time there would be the number one thing I'd say is a critical piece to having a successful, high performing team.
Excellent point. So what was it that drew you to Vector Labs? I mean, you said that you were plucked away, but at the same time, there must have been some foundational things where you said, hey, look, I'm currently at Gore. There's a chance for me to go somewhere else. And of course,
Yeah.
it's always flattering to have somebody, interested in you, but at the same time, I'm just interested in looking a little deeper. What were your initial impressions of the company and its culture, and what was it that drew you there?
Yeah. Um, it's a couple things. So, I guess the very first thing I always told myself, I learned early on, probably, back from my experience of being a BD and going somewhere and coming back to BD, that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. It's just somebody else's grass. And so, I thought, even when things are clunky, wherever you're working, what are the things that are most critical to you that would, make you jump or make you stay? And at Gore, for a really long time, it was about the culture. Up until when I left, I loved the culture at Gore. It was highly collaborative, really fit with my kind of feedback style, willingness to just sort of share, take on an owner's mindset, kind of call stuff if we see something that's not working, but then also be part of the solution. There's a lot about that culture that I loved. And so I told myself if I ever went anywhere else, I would want to, take the things I loved about that culture and be able to see that, in the future organization. Um, so when I was looking at Vector, I saw a ton of similarities in their mission and how they operate. Got to experience the executive team in a certain way where I could see how they worked together, where I could see what Lisa, our CEO's dynamic was with them. And so they're really just sort of, leading by example and kind of showing me what the culture felt like. And I was just really, kind of excited and enamored by that. Um, on the business side, though, that was one of the discussions I had with Lisa very early when I was just trying to kind of understand what is the role, what's the company up against. Um, and that really kind of brought forward this shift that the company is making toward kind of an industrial B2B side of things. And that's really interesting for me. My background is all B2B. It's all I've ever really done with my prior life. So it felt like something where it presented a challenge. It was kind of problem solving and puzzling for the organization, but where I could really sort of leverage my skill set and bring that to them. And then on the flip side is I've not really had a lot of experience in certain portions of marketing that Vector does today. So like e-commerce is a great example. We used e-commerce at Gore, but it was more for our fabrics division and other parts that were a little bit more on the consumer side, but never necessarily in B2B. And we have that platform for, parts of our portfolio that we're serving now that are more for your kind of academic scientists and researchers. And so just a really great blend of, leveraging existing skills and then being able to learn new ones. Um, and then I guess finally I was really inspired just by having a woman CEO. To me, that was, really exciting just personally for my own learning and, you know, understanding what other women have been up against and how they've grown and how they manage conversations in the boardroom. So yeah, I guess all around it just felt like a really great kind of blend and chance for me to learn.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, corporate America so much, you just don't see the female CEO that often in
Yeah.
broader corporate America. And I mean, even whenever you look across the executive team, I mean, I've had these discussions as well, where it's like, a room filled with men and possibly one woman, in the room. At times there can be, two, but oftentimes, most of the most senior leadership, it's all men, and
Yeah.
oftentimes all white men. And so it's like,
Yeah.
having this mix of representation of like what represents America, and then also what represents the broader global culture. And then lastly,
Yeah.
um, like how do you get those right ideas in the room if you don't have that
Yes.
representation? It's like it's very hard to do.
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely right, absolutely right, yeah, so, yeah, and it's, it's not to say, like, I've had, really great, men who've been champions for me in my career and good role models, but, there is something to be said for, feeling like you can relate to somebody on a different level and learn from them on a different level, and, to your point on diversity on the team and perspective, even as leaders, how do we think about doing that within our own teams?